Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan. We're going to finish off our very exciting series that we've done, a podcast series previewing the Eagles' NFC East foes and where they're at this point in the offseason. We've talked about where the Eagles are at, and in our first two series, Adam, we talked about where the Giants are at and where the Cowboys are at. And I think you and I both came to the conclusion those teams have some talent, but they got some work to do individually to really bridge that gap between the Eagles and them. But here we finish off the series on a team that is on the up and up, beat the Eagles last year in the regular season, faced the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, and has made the type of aggressive moves, Adam, in the offseason that we've seen the Eagles make when they feel like they're on the cusp of being really, really good.
Yeah, in fact, I think that was part of their plan. Is they saw, look, they got blown out against the Eagles, right? They got absolutely smoked by 32 points. It was a weird game though. In the first half, it could have been anyone's game, but Eagles just destroyed them in the second half. But they learned. Look, they had offensive line problems. They overachieved offensively. I think if you talk to people there privately, they would tell you quarterback was brilliant. Their offensive line played way better than expected. A lot of things happened that probably nobody expected. And I doubt that the front office or coaching staff thought they'd be as good as they were. Because we saw this with the Giants, right? We saw this at 22 at Brian Daboll's year. I remember talking to the Giants then, and they're like, wow, I hope people don't think we're as good as what happened. I remember one person's telling me that. He goes, look, we feel like we've got a good coaching staff and this, that, and the other. And then they completely fell off. Whereas this team knows they have the quarterback, where the Giants weren't quite sure.
Right.
You saw how that worked out. So it starts with a quarterback. They've got one. They know it. They got their franchise quarterback in JaydenDaniels. It would be hard for him to keep up this pace. He was phenomenal. You mentioned sort of how they addressed this offseason, and they addressed you can't address every need in one offseason. It's impossible. As John Lynch showed me, the 49ers GM many years ago in his office, him and Kyle Shanahan, they have that placard where you have to be careful of not trying to patchwork everything through free agency. That's not the way you win.
Right.
But they're ahead of schedule, man. They're a fun team to watch. And it's going to be cool to see Hurts versus Daniels for a number of years going against each other. We can talk about quarterback versus quarterback, coaches versus coaches, Sirianni versus Quinn, and all the matchups and so forth. It's going to be fun seeing these two teams now.
100%. Whenever a team makes a big splash, either in a trade or free agency, there's always that you got to look at it from both sides of the equation. Take the Eagles trade for A.J. Brown a couple of years ago. It seemed like, wow, they're getting A.J. Brown, good receiver, but why are the Titans trading him? And then there's the knee issue, and you wonder if he's going to be as good, and then he winds up being better. Same thing with Saquon Barkley. And you and I had some sort of questions on the fit, the scheme, like how that was going to work. Don't they want to throw the ball a lot? And he hasn't stayed healthy, but those worked. And there are some trades that go the other way. When you look at the two big moves the Commanders have made, you have to apply the same sort of dual way of looking at it. Laremy Tunsil has been a really, really good left tackle in the NFL for a long time. And Deebo Samuel has been a good move-Z for the 49ers. His kind of stats bounce up and down depending on usage. And he's obviously coming off a year where he was I think he had pneumonia, he was injured. It's not a great year. But at face value, these two players are, no matter what, are theoretically way better than the players that Washington was playing in those positions last year. So this has a chance to be the type of moves that really put the Commanders up there with the Eagles and make them formidable, or it's not going to work out and they're going to wonder, where it went wrong.
Yeah, so let's get started with Washington's offense. So with the Laremy Tunsil trade, and they gave up a ton of draft compensation, though they didn't give up a first rounder. They made a decision, as I understand, at the end of last season that Brandon Coleman would no longer be their left tackle. Mm-hmm. Right now, they'll decide. I believe it's going to be guard, but as I understand, it's not totally decided. But with Sam Cosmi, who's the right guard, he suffered his ACL injury in the playoffs in the blowout win at Detroit, by the way. So there will be obviously a serious question whether he'll be ready for the start of the season. So they have to figure out who's going to be his replacement if he's not ready. And Brandon Coleman can play right tackle, left tackle, or guard. So they'll work that out through their offseason program. But the big one is Tunsil. Now, I know some people around the league didn't think Tunsil was coming off an elite year. He's still very, very good. He's still a top 5 left tackle, no question, maybe top 3, depending on who's doing the grading. But this is a huge deal for them. They overachieved their offensive line last season. It was one of these situations where you talk to people around the league, they go, "This is not good." But Biadasz is a upper half of the group of centers in the NFL. He's okay. I mean, nice player, nothing special. Allegretti's a grinder, their left guard. Andrew Wiley's a grinder, another one from right tackle. What that means, they're not good athletes. They get by on toughness. And then, Cosme is a really good player. Like he was a tackle in college at Texas, and he moved to Garden and became a great player. But now he's got his injury. So, although they like this kid, Chris Paul, we talked about him, folks, leading up to the playoff game against the Eagles. They really like this kid. Mm-hmm. Number 75 is on the final of his rookie deal, who's 7th rounder, but he's a backup. They feel like they brought Nate Herbig in over from Pittsburgh. Michael Dieter's back as a backup center. Trent Scott's back. They re-signed him. Bobby Hart, who's been around, he's a journeyman. Been around a long time. Julian Good-Jones is still there, by the way. Former Eagle. Yep. Aneem Dankwa, who the Eagles liked last year in the draft, in terms of an undrafted free agent, didn't work out, but he's there. So they feel good about their depth. It's just getting everything together. They have 3 starters back. Tunsil's new, and then we'll see about Cosme when he's ready. So you're going forward here. They're well coached by Bobby Johnson, who's been around a long time with Buffalo, the Raiders, the Lions. The Giants, he was part of that playoff team with the Giants at 22. So they're in good hands here. The thing is, can they keep this up, though? Because I'm telling you that I would shake my head. I'm like, how are they doing this? Because it is, like, let's be honest, other than Cosme last year, Coleman was not ready, and they severely overachieved on their offensive line.
Yeah, and I think that's why the Tunsil addition is so vital for them and for it to need to work out, because if it does, just think about what the Washington offensive line has looked like before last year, right? Before it overachieved. And then last year it overachieved, but before it was always the Achilles heel. And to think that in year 2 of JaydenDaniels, you could have Laremy Tunsil at left tackle. Let's say by October, if Sam Cosme back, you got Laremy Tunsil at left tackle. Let's say Brandon Coleman left guard. Biadasz is good enough, serviceable at center. Cosme is a very good right guard when healthy. Now, Andrew Wiley's your right tackle, but nothing is stopping because of the moves that Washington has made from using a 1st or a 2nd round pick on an offensive lineman, which is something, again, that they hadn't done very well in the past. But, Adam Peters is going to, he's from the San Francisco tree, and they haven't always valued offensive line, but clearly the moves he's made this offseason seems to think that he values it. So if they draft a tackle in the 1st or 2nd round and that guy can play well, that gives them, to me, a way better representation of an offensive line than they've had in years, Adam. And with what they've already got at quarterback, and then adding some playmaking ability there in Deebo Samuel to McLaurin, they could be a pretty good offense, because in general, they were a good offense until they played the Eagles, because they moved the ball well. They were good on 3rd down. They were good on 4th down. The quarterback was very smart. They protected the ball well until they played the Eagles.
Yeah, so with their offensive line, Andrew Wiley's on the final year of his deal. He's boy. I'm interested. Yeah, I'm interested to see what they do here. Yeah, you could certainly see them. In fact, I think he took a pay reduction. I could certainly see them drafting a right tackle. Mm-hmm. Not typically something you draft in the 1st round unless he's really elite. Look, they've got to keep improving here, because if they could learn anything from the Eagles, it's trying to be elite up front. And the Eagles have done it for a number of years. They've won 2 Super Bowls by doing that. They also had good depth, as you know. We learned that about Big V in 2017. You can never have enough offensive linemen. What did Howie say at the I think he said it at the combine. You can never have enough guys. He got worried when they had a couple injuries last season, Mm-hmm. So that's the way to do it. Peters and Lance Newmark, they're the 2 guys in the front office. Newmark came over from Detroit. And Newmark would know. He knows the value of an offensive line. So, yeah, I'm with you there. They got to keep addressing that offensive line.
When you look at their playmakers, McLaurin has been such a good find for them out of the 3rd round in 2019. Yep. They add Deebo. I mean, it's impossible for us to sit here and predict whether he's going to bounce back and be really good. And I think the thing we can say is Cliff Kingsbury will have a really good plan for him, just like Kyle Shanahan did when Deebo was healthy and productive. He'll move around. He'll probably get the ball in the short game, in the run game. We'll see. They'll do some different things from him, but he definitely gives them a little bit more of a juice as long as he's healthy and in shape than what they had previously. But I still think this, Zach Ertz comes back at tight end. They'll get year 2 of Benson. I feel like they're still maybe an electric playmaker away from being an explosive offense. They showed they can be methodical. Everybody remembers the 18-play drive they had against the Eagles in the NFC Championship to open the game. They only got 3 points out of it, but they were very good at being methodical. Cliff Kingsbury has done a really nice job with his personnel, but I bet you Cliff would love one guy. And not that McLaurin isn't good, but he's getting a little older now. One guy, though, who's a little bit more of an electric field stretcher, 30, 40 yards downfield, contested catch guy, something like that.
Totally agree. Funny. It's in my notes here is that, Deebo is not an explosive guy downfield. That's not what he does. He's all run after the catch, gadgets, get his hands, run after the catch. That's why Kyle Shanahan wanted him. He coached him in the Senior Bowl. He knew what he was getting. See, I know some people believe that Deebo Samuel has lost a step. That I'm not so sure about that. You got to look at what happened with Brock Purdy and their offensive line last season. So, look, the Niners were done with Deebo. They wanted to move him. As soon as they drafted Pearsall, which was a surprise last year, someone had to go. And they re-signed Ayuk. You knew Samuel was going to be next to go, and that's what happened. But, yeah, I totally agree. McLaurin can run, though. He absolutely can run, but he's not an elite field stretcher. Now, Michael Gallup, it's funny. They signed Michael Gallup last week, who retired for a year. Michael Gallup was that guy. And then he tore his ACL, was never the same. He didn't look right with the Raiders. Now, the Washingtons bring him in there. We'll see what he can do. But Noah Brown's back. KJ Osborne's back. Chris Moore's more of a special teams player that became a receiver later in his career. So, yeah, they don't have that guy. Ben Sinnott, as I understand, was a little bit behind with their offense last season. John Bates was re-signed. He's their wide tight end. Good player, by the way.
Yeah, like him.
And Cole Turner is a move tight end who I saw at the Senior Bowl. This is his final year of his contract. So you're right, but that's what you were talking about with Cliff Kingsbury. He does a phenomenal job of manufacturing offense. That's what he does better than most. He'll keep doing it, but it's funny you say it. I see it the same way. They're one explosive playmaker away from having a special offense. I see that.
Yeah, and just to finish off on the run game, I feel the same way. It's a very functional, serviceable, grinded-out run game. Robinson is a good between-the-tackles runner. He can make yards after contact. We saw him do that. Austin Eckler is a nice change-up. You can throw him the ball. He can beat you in the flats. I mean, he's not dynamic, but he's good. He's good at doing what he's asked to do. If you told me, I would totally understand. If you told me the Commanders moved up a little bit in the draft, if this guy started to fall to get the Boise kid, Ashton Genty, because he fell, and you added him to this team, I would say that's a move, because now you've given yourself the dynamic playmaker. Maybe it's not the guy on the outside, but in your running game, who's a home run hitter. Now
Travion Henderson is the home run hitter of this draft.
The Ohio State running back? Yeah,
he's a little bit smaller, but I was talking to a scouting director over the weekend for a team. He's not as physically gifted as Jahmyr Gibbs. And Gibbs also runs really tough. He's more physical than you think.
Yeah.
but this guy said, now Hampton is going to go higher, but because he's also bigger physically. But Henderson is that guy. I would love to see them get an explosive back to pair up with Brian Robinson. Then you're cooking with oil. Now you got it. So
then maybe you're not as worried about that extra receiver who can do a little bit more than it, because you can just do the ball to guy 20-25.
I mean, Luke McCaffrey there's too. Yeah, Luke McCaffrey's there as well.
Right, Luke McCaffrey in the slot, year 2 for him. Yeah. So an improving offense, but really, it's to sum it all up. If Deebo and Tunsil don't play well, and if they continue to regress, then it's not going to be as fruitful for Washington unless they draft really well. We'll have to see where they go ahead and draft.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
So let's talk about defense. They made some interesting moves, Adam. First of all, the one thing about Washington we can say, unlike the Cowboys, is that this is the same staff. That DQ year 2. I don't think they had too many, if any, staff changes. So there'll be some cohesion there and camaraderie coming off their banner year last year. They did add up front with Javon Kinlaw to a free agent contract. I don't love Javon Kinlaw as a player.
I couldn't
but
believe the contract. God.
I think they overpaid, but I like the depth that they're giving themselves. Like, he can play in this league. He's just, to me, not a difference maker. But when you put him with Newton,
they're paying him to be, because
I know I know. Like I
contract's
said, I thought
ridiculous.
they overpaid, and maybe
Yep.
maybe Adam Peters knows that, because this is his guy from when they drafted him in San Francisco, and he was hurt in San Francisco. But to me, I've never watched the Jets or the Niners defense and thought, man, that Javon Kinlaw is really given the opposing offense some trouble. But again, the concept of, if you're throwing Kinlaw, Juice Newton, for their second round pick from last year, and they still have Duran, right?
Duran Payne, they cut Allen, but
that's good depth right there. I mean, you can win
very
games.
Good. Yep. Yeah. Heck, they signed Eddie Goldman. I mean, their defense is very deep. Now, the one argument you would have, who are your blue chip players? Duran Payne, good player. I wouldn't put him as a blue chip player. Javon Kinlaw had a good year. It's his first really good year in his career, and he got paid. He got $30 million fully guaranteed signing. That was a stunner. I know he's got unbelievable length for a defensive tackle. And look, if he plays like a first-round pick, then it'll look like it. It'll be worth it. But Dietrich Wise comes over from Washington, was a nice signing.
Greg Cosell really liked that signing.
Wise has always shown up. Cleveland Farrell was kind of morphed into a nice player. Yes, he was overdrafted by the Raiders, but become a good player. They're good. And then the deep tackle group, Johnny Newton and Goldman, and Sheldon Day's been around a long time. Jalen Holmes has been around, who's could play inside or outside on the defensive line. This is a super deep group. But what they don't have is that A-level pass rusher. That is the problem with this football team on defense. They just don't have that guy.
Right, which is another reason why in the draft they could be looking to pad their edges there.
They should.
They really should if they can. Yeah, they bring back Cleveland Farrell. Again, these guys played. I feel like everybody that Washington brought in last year, and this is probably a testament to Dan Quinn and Adam Peters and the culture they set. They held their own to the bargain. Cleveland Farrell didn't play like the top 10 pick that he was, but he was able to give them snaps, like meaningful snaps, and be able to play. But you're right, they need somebody who can really hurt the quarterbacks, and get out there and cause some pressure on the edges. They used Frankie Louvu a lot as we moved to the linebackers as a blitzer. So good. That was a great signing. Frankie, we said that last all season that this guy was a special player. He showed it. He's like a heat-seeking missile. He's all over the field. They use him as a blitzer. They use him in the run game. He's great. He's just a menace. And, I was a little surprised they brought back Bobby Wagner because, Cosell told us he felt like Wagner's play really fell off last year. But I get it. Locker room guy, culture guy, maybe add another linebacker just to give yourself a nice young emerging guy. But overall, when you got Frankie Louvu and what you have at defensive tackle, you got a pretty good front six there.
Yeah, Frankie Louvu is an amazing player. He's a guy that I remember talking to the Jets about him. I'm like, what? He started to come on a little bit, and then, he signed a nice free agent deal with Carolina. Jets should have never let him go, but he was small. Like, teams are trying to figure out what he is. He's about 6'2", 230, 235. Is he an edge rusher? He's probably too small. Is he an outside linebacker? Maybe, depending which front you use. But anyway, he's a stud. They don't have very good depth at linebacker. That's certainly going to be an issue if somebody gets hurt. But the big story is how deep they are in the secondary.
Oh, yeah.
And Sainristil, and Greg talked to us about this last week. Most people in the league thought it would not work for him to play outside corner full-time. They'd have to eventually move into nickel. Well, based on what they've done this offseason, it sure sounds like they're going to keep him outside with Marshawn Lattimore. Igbo Hagany became a player last season, a bust of a first-round pick for the Dolphins. Never worked, didn't work for Dallas, but he really came into his own, playing nickel, by the way.
Yep.
And Jonathan Jones comes over, who's in the twilight of his career, could play nickel. So by the way, Igbo Hagany and Jones could play on the outside if needed. So because if you really look at their outside group, they just don't have Kevon Seymour, who he's still playing. He's still playing, but they just don't have the depth at outside corner. So Igbo Hagany and Jones could play both.
Mm-hmm.
And at safety, Will Harris comes over. He'll replace Jeremy Chin. Jeremy Chin played very well last season for Washington. I know they were pretty happy with him.
Yeah, I wonder if they were just looking to get a little bit more diverse on the back end, because Chin's like that hybrid linebacker safety, and Luvu kind of plays all over the place. And, I don't know if they saw that as too similar, but they may have felt like they needed a little bit more coverage on the back end, especially when you're going up against Devontae Smith and AJ Brown and Malik Neighbors and CeeDee Lamb. So that's interesting. I thought Chin played well, and I thought he would be back, but did he sign anywhere yet?
He did. Yeah. He signed with the Raiders. 2-year deal worth just over $8 million per season. Pretty good guarantee at signing. So yeah, but you're right. He's more of a intermediate depth or box safety.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to be used a certain way for him to be successful. Will Harris has been around a number of years, came over from the Saints. He's played well. Quan Martin now, because Quan Martin was drafted by Ron Rivera to, who's now in his third year. Wow, how time has flown, to be a nickel, and now he's straight. Percy Butler's there, he was on the fine end deal. They're not real deep at safety in terms of depth, but this is just a very solid, well-coached team, well-coached defense with Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr.
Yeah,
who handle the defense. It's just they've I agree. And John Pagano, Chuck's brother, was added to the staff as a senior defensive assistant. That's a pretty good hire. This is a good staff, man. This is our 8th year, folks. I know some Commander fans are watching. This is our 8th year. The Commanders have never been good until last season. They've been a team that we always dreaded talking about because they were always a nightmare with Dan Snyder. Yeah. But they got something going on here. It's pretty good.
I mean, when's the last time we could say the Commanders were good 2 years in a row?
Never.
I think Joe Gibbs was coaching the team.
Out of retirement, right.
Yeah.
Listen to the staff, though, right? On offense, Bobby Ingram, really good receivers coach, you remember from Penn State, and the Bears and Seahawks. Sharif Floyd, former first-round pick, really talented young defensive line coach.
From Philly.
William Gay, you might remember as a corner for the Raiders, for the Steelers, as an assistant DB's coach. Brian Johnson came over from the Eagles. Anthony Lynn, running backs coach. Ryan Kerrigan, pass rush specialist. He's going to help out at LB's. Ken Norton Jr., who's been a D coordinator in the league. Tavita Pritchard, who's a specialist he coaches quarterbacks. Really, Darnell Stapleton, who played in the league. He's assistant O-line coach. Darryl Tapp, everybody remembers, who follows the league closely, was a defensive end for the Eagles and Seahawks, amongst other teams. Darnell Stapleton, assistant O-line coach, I'm told, is pretty good, who played for the Steelers. This is a really good staff.
Yeah, it's a good staff. You're absolutely right. Good culture. You have to give credit to I know some Sixers fans don't want to do it, but you have to give some credit to Josh Harris. I mean, he bought that team. He changed things up. You saw on the report card, they got a lot of high grades. I mean, honestly, after moving on from Dan Snyder, I think you and I could have bought the team and treated the players better and got really good grades. But the reality is he did, he was a big part of that, and he hired, Dan Quinn, and Quinn has brought in some really good coaching staff there. So for the first time in a long time, we're talking about the Commanders as not just a flash in the pan team, but a team that, coming off a 12-5 season, Adam, I think that I think their floor for next year, and we'll see how it goes, as long as they stay healthy, is probably 11 or 12, and the ceiling's a lot higher.
Yeah, I've got 11 and 12 would be we got to see what happens in the draft and rest of free agency. But yeah, they need to sum this up. They need juice they need an explosive playmaker, running back, or receiver, 100%. You and I are seeing it the same way. In fact, I do both. I get a running back with some juice. I know they have a number of backs on the roster. It doesn't matter. They have to get someone with explosiveness to complement Brian Robinson. They need a field stretcher receiver. And honestly, they just need a better pass rusher on defense. They're deep. That's not the issue. Depth has nothing to do with it.
Right.
It's where's that big-time pass rusher? They don't have that guy. Dorrance Armstrong's a nice player, but you wouldn't call him an explosive pass rusher.
No. They need to do like what the Rams did. They need to, get their version of like a Verse and a Braden Fisk. Maybe use their first 2 picks on young pass rushers and see how they fit in to the mold. And I think that the Commanders kicking the tires on Michael Gallup, as you mentioned, Adam, is validation of what we're saying, is that they're looking. They're trying to find any avenue they can just to see if they can get one more explosive downfield playmaker.
Yeah, they're going to be a problem for the Eagles. They're going to be there. They are so set up. It's funny because for over the years, everyone talks about the Eagles-Cowboys rivalry and all that, and that's fine. If you grew up in Philly, yeah, I get that. But I'd be stunned. Look, I'm not saying JaydenDaniels couldn't have a down year. Of course you can. Any quarterback can. But there's a saying around the National Football League, when you're around it, when you're around really gifted quarterbacks. He is, and I give Adam Peters credit for the trade of Tunsil. He gets Deebo Samuel. They're obviously not done. They got the draft and rest of free agency. So they're there, man. They're on the doorstep. Good for Commander fans. And my friend Bram Weinstein, the play-by-play voice, he and I work together at ESPN. He's a great dude, and
He's good.
He grew up in the area, and he's got to love it. He got there at the right time, man. They've turned this thing around. It's going to be fun to watch them compete against the Eagles.
All right, we'll end it on this note. It's our fact that I've repeated. We both of us have repeated over and over and over and over that no team has won the NFC East 2 years in a row since the Eagles did in 2003 and 2004. That is now longer than 20 years. So the Eagles have a lot of history going against them as the Commanders are chasing their tails.
I remember when I told you that, you were like, what? I said,
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, this is ridiculous. The Eagles won 4 divisional championships in a row, 2001 through 2004. But back-to-back, as you said, 2003, 2004. It just, how could a division with only 4 teams not have a repeat winner? We'll see. I mean,
two of them have basically eliminated themselves before the season has started for most of the last 20 years. The Giants and Commanders, like we said, it's almost like they never have 2 good years in a row.
Well, and the Giants could bounce back a little bit, be an 8 or 9, 10, or 8 through 10 wins if they get the quarterback, because the rest of the roster, as we talked about in the show last week, we wrote down the Giants is good, but Dallas is just, who knows with them. With that roster, they need to play with more discipline, and we'll see. They got Brian Schottenheimer. People don't want him to be the head coach, but Washington, though, they're back, and it's been a long time, and Commander fans enjoy it. They should be good for a long time.
All right, that was fun. A great series exploring where these 3 NFC East foes are at this point in the offseason. And of course, later this summer, after all the draft and the moves are made and any other stuff, we bring in Greg Cosell to do a full, including the Eagles, NFC East preview, which we usually do in June or July. So look forward to doing that again this year as well. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the birds. Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.